Hello, this is James Hunter, and this is my YouTube/podcast channel. And today I'm going to be interviewing Rebecca Hale, who is a physical therapist, aka architect of movement, as that's as her way of speaking about what she does. That's her preference, architect of movement, and I love that. And I'm going to ask her a bit more about herself in a minute. And I just want to succinctly just speak about why I'm doing these videos. The reason is I'm talking with people from different belief systems, different backgrounds, whether it's in the wellness industry, maybe people with spiritual beliefs that vary, or just people in general that have their opinions about any number of existential issues, philosophy, health, wellness, why we're here, purpose, meaning, and so on. So without further ado, let me get into asking my questions with Rebecca. So my first question is pretty much, tell us about your background, what you do, and how did you arrive at this point in your life with what you're doing?
So I have been in physical therapy for 25 years. I definitely chose the career because I was an athlete and I could never see myself doing a desk job. I needed to keep moving. And I thought I would work with athletes. When I graduated, I also was a mom, a new mom. So looking for a job that was flexible and everything became really important right off the bat. I started working with the elderly, and I did that for a good chunk of my career. And in that, one of the big things that I discovered that also helped me with my healing journey was that movement and creating a connection with your clients and creating a safe space with your clients was vital to them having success. And I noticed that I was more a cheerleader than, giving them expertise. Exercises are great, but really, even now, this day and age, you can look up exercises all over the place. So the way that I became a better clinician was that I brought myself and I connected with my clients and I gave them a space to feel comfortable, to let their body relax and really get in a space where they trusted their body and taught them how to listen and get in connection with their body. So this was like a really driving force for me. And what a big shift in my career was when my children hit the school age. So I started noticing my kids who were intelligent and engaging when they went to school became problem children and lots of challenges and couldn't access the curriculum. And there was a lot of struggles. And I started diving deep on neurological, connections and what's going on and what has to do with the brain-body connection. And so I started doing so much research about that. And I shifted my career. I went as a physical therapist into the schools. And that's where I've landed. And the working with kids ended up bringing up a whole mess of stuff for me emotionally. And I started just seeing the connection of the brain-body connection and fight or flight and being safe and all of those things. So being a mom, really connecting, dealing with my own trauma history, all became intertwined completely and has landed me where I am, which is I work part-time in the school system because I love helping and educating parents and teachers on the mechanics of if you don't have gross motor development, and if you go into a classroom and you don't feel safe, you're going to shut off. You shut off the mechanisms to be able to access learning. And so I teach them how to use their body. I teach the teachers how to recognize, if a kid's bouncing around the classroom, there's something there that we have to pay attention to. Wow. And that's my driving force. And yet, I don't know if this is true for you in your career path, but as a physical therapist, we talked about this right before we got on, is I felt really boxed in. Yeah. That I couldn't do everything I wanted to do for clients. So now I do things on the outside of school. I like to educate. I'm doing my best to share on social media because I want to be out of the box and share all of the things that I've come to learn. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I love what you said about the boxes, right? Because, I've been a licensed psychotherapist, 24 years. I've also been the NSCA certified personal trainer. And I did that throughout my life. And I even had a studio at one point where I essentially had a gym and office to do mental health. And then and they could also do physical exercise programs at the same location. And I did that for a number of years until I moved into a different direction as I started getting older. So this box thing, right? People are like, what? You're a psychotherapist and you train people to be physically fit too? You're both. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't have to be just one thing necessarily because of what my education or what I'm licensed at, right? So being able to step outside the box, and yeah, there's something to be said about depending on what your license is, what you're going to practice within that license, because the state has these rules, right? So you got to be, there's a way to work through that, right? You can do it ethically, and I do too. So I would, okay, within this context, this is the expectation, what we're doing. And within this context, yep, this is the expectation, what I can do here. But then finding a way to help meet people's needs by being this flexible and maybe stepping into other realms to where you can be in a different box to do other things. I can appreciate that. And I always take little notes here when I'm listening to someone speak, because I want to ask, be able to comment on a few things. And so, this idea of, you mentioned a cheerleader, right? Being a better clinician. I cannot stress enough the importance of building relationships with people, whether you're someone who does what I do. It's all about the relationship, building rapport, being a cheerleader, if you will, maybe that unconditional positive regard, if you want to call it that, because it's that trust that you build with a client. Because you can have all the education in the world and know your stuff, but if a person doesn't feel comfortable with you, then that can undermine your effectiveness as a helper with somebody. So you mentioned, this idea, about basically fight or flight, and understanding these things as you got older, right? So I used to have a professor, I say this a lot in my videos. He used to say, we're not as far out of the woods as we like to think we are, right? We have these instincts in us. So despite all of our context with us being civilized, quote unquote, our technology, all these things, we still have this instinct in us in terms of how our bodies and the brain, our sympathetic nervous system creates that involuntary response, accelerated heart rate, blood pressure to make your muscles contract stronger so you can run faster to escape or fight if you have to. Yeah. Makes you harder to kill, as I always say. It's true. Yeah. So we still have that. So understanding that. So this idea about the boxes, and then kind of expanding yourself and what you want to do, architect of movement, and educating people. I was kind of wanting to go into that direction. So, okay, here's the deal. Let's be honest. You're right. You can go on YouTube, Google, and find a plethora of exercises and how to do things. Like you're doing the video series on walking backwards. That's fantastic. Someone can watch that video. But let's be honest. A lot of the problems of people's wellness and health in this world, it's not simply an issue of here's the diet, here's how to eat, here's the exercise to strengthen your extensor spinae muscles, right? And systemically how stretching and strengthening the hamstrings and the glutes, that's going to help support your lower back, and then also the legs, that whole system that works together. So systemically, if you improve all this stuff, guess what? Your back's not going to hurt no more. Imagine that. Hip thrust and a plank. And hey, what good is it to understand proper mechanics to use your legs to pick a box up off the floor if you don't have the strength and conditioning to even execute the movement? You might understand it, but you're not going to execute it because you don't have the strength and conditioning. So now you overload the back and hurt it, right? So we could talk about what works all day long.
Right.
But the problem is the motivation to use knowledge. You've heard it before. Knowledge is power. And I always say that's not true. Knowledge is useless in and of itself. It's the application and the utility of knowledge that is effective and can change your life.
Yeah. And it really does support the whole concept of having coaches or, whatever, because I know just you referenced the backward walking. One of the things that I found so fascinating was I'm just asking people to do it for 2 minutes. And there were so many people that were fascinated by it and either didn't even try it or tried it, but couldn't even last for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not hard.
Yeah. It's not, and not to be mean, but it is really shocking to me how deconditioned people are in this day and age.
Yes.
You might have heard of Dr. Frank Booth. He's an exercise physiologist.
Sure.
Yeah. He coined the term sedentary early death syndrome. And that by itself, being sedentary, is a greater risk factor for anything else that's responsible for premature death, early unnecessary disease, decline, sarcopenia, everything, the person just deconditioning and going downhill.
Yeah.
That variable alone right there, just being sedentary, right?
Yeah. I love the when they do series on where are the centurions in our world, and you look at the Mediterranean culture and you look at Asian cultures. And I was just telling a friend the other day, like they're down, they're squatted, their ankles are bent, their knees are bent, their hips are rotated, and they're squatting and digging in the dirt, like at 100.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just not, it's not hard. Like I tell people, just get outside and move your body, challenge your body to do a little bit, just for a little bit. You don't have to go to the gym and weight lift to be in good balanced condition.
Yeah, that's right. 100%. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to. Oh, I wasn't athletic in high school. Well, it's not you don't have to have been, because at this point in your life, it's about being functionally, physically fit to be able to have that better quality of life. Because the idea, you become stronger through strengthening and conditioning well beyond what you need for activities of daily living. So everything becomes easy for you by comparison. So with atrophy and hypertrophy, right? Hypertrophy, I always mess that up, right? So yeah, they go in both directions. So astronauts, the early space program, zero gravity, what happened? They'd come back, they'd be weak. Did have their bone mineral density was less. They lost bone mineral, and loss of muscle. So what do they do now? They got to have a high protein diet, make sure they get enough protein, and they have exercise equipment to at least have something to give the body a reason to maintain those adaptations. So this is true in life. To not get too technical, but it's what it is. If you don't give your body a reason to maintain, at a minimum, you got to withstand gravity, but that's not enough. Right? No. Sit in the chair all day. No, you got to do beyond that. So this thing you're mentioning about the people and it's 2 minutes. So here's what I wanted to say. And I say this a lot, and you can borrow this from me if you want, or take it and use it if you may have already used it before. I work with people a lot, and I always say this. I say, look, at the end of the day, I get it. There can be reasons or explanations why you're not doing something, excuses, right? But at the end of the day, the evidence that's observable, quantifiable, measurable for what a person values and what the priorities are their decisions and their behaviors and what they do, period. So when people say, oh, it was 2 minutes and I didn't do it. Or I have a meme of a cartoon from years ago, and the doctor's telling the patient, what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising up to an hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? That's right. That's right. Yeah. So there you go. So what's the priority is the point, because I guarantee you people budget and allocate time and resources and money for the things they do value. And because they assign a worth to it, value, they prioritize it. So when I hear somebody say, I can't just see myself spending that much money for a gym membership, or eating healthy is expensive, which is BS. It's not more expensive. Eating bad food is expensive. It can be, right? So eating healthy is not too expensive. That's a myth. But what it is rationalizing and being dismissive. They want to feel less anxious about it, so they have this way of spinning it. But the truth is, when I hear people say this, and especially people I know, I'm like, well, when I hear you say that you can't see yourself spending money on a gym membership or making time to exercise, however, on the other hand, I know you spend probably $500 a month on going fishing. I know your rods and reels are easily thousands of dollars, and that boat out there in your driveway costs a lot of money to maintain. So when I hear you say this, I feel confused, right? Yeah. What's the priority here? So I said, the truth is, let's be honest, just look yourself in the mirror and just say it's not a priority. That's what it is. It's not a priority. So if it's by default not a priority, as evidenced by how you're allocating your time, then your health is not a priority. It's not important until maybe it fails you, and then you panic and, oh, now I need to do something. And even then, unfortunately, for some people, that's not even enough either, right? Yeah.
Where do you lay the whole concept of self-sabotage in that, where somebody does have priorities, but they just can't get out of their own way? Like, do you have space for that possibility, where, you know, how you were saying, it's like we intellectually know something,
Yes,
but then we have this response that is almost a protective response.
yeah,
And what is that about, and how do you navigate that? Or
Yeah.
how does one
excellent,
navigate that?
excellent question, right? So counselors and therapists use a technique called motivational interviewing technique. So basically, you're going to roll with resistance. So you'll have people come up with their excuses, and I'm going to talk about how you can address that too. Resistance to change. So you roll with it, because if you attack directly the reasons are given you to not change, that's like trying to come in through the front door of somebody, and sometimes you got to sneak up behind them and come in through the back door in a roundabout way. So what I do is I listen. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, and then I listen, I validate how they feel, and then I wait for a nugget or an opportunity with anything they say that sounds like, hey, that's an opportunity. That's what I call change talk, right? So for example, let's say somebody needs to stop drinking alcohol. They have an alcohol use disorder. That's what we call it today. But they have ambivalence. They're not ready to change that. So maybe they're giving all their excuses, rationalizing why they don't think they have a problem with alcohol, even though they're in a EAP program, so they don't lose their job because they got a DWI while on the job, right? So they have all these distortions why they don't have a problem with alcohol. But so I'm listening, and I'm not directly attacking the fallacy with their logic. So then I hear the person say, you know, but I don't want my wife to leave me. I care about my wife. We've been married 20 years. We got 3 kids. So then I'll say, it sounds like you really value your wife, right? So I jump on that. So you roll with resistance, focus on what they value. Because sometimes that's your inroad, right? And there's different reasons for change. First order change might be, I'm going to change so my wife doesn't leave me. I'm going to change so I don't lose my job as a truck driver, because as a CDL license, I can't be overweight. I can't let my diabetes progress to being insulin dependent, because if I'm dependent on insulin, that's a liability being on the road driving. So I'm going to start begrudgingly making changes to lose some weight so I don't have diabetes, so I can keep my job. So that's kind of like a first order change. It's not really they're doing it for themselves primarily.
Yeah.
Versus I'm changing because this is the good thing to do for my health. I value my health, job or no job. I'm doing it for me, right? Versus I'm going to stop drinking alcohol for myself because I know that I have a problem with it. And because I'm doing it for myself, that's more sustainable. And yeah, of course, my family will benefit too, right? So a lot of times this rolling with resistance and then focusing on anything that you can tether to them that they value, that can be part of the reason for changing, because there's nothing wrong to be compelled or motivated to make changes because of people you care about, but hopefully it's going to be more about deeper level things too. So cognitive dissonance happens a lot. Like,
Yeah.
that's right. Well,
Love
people,
that
that's
conversation.
right. Yeah. So guess what? People, they can do one or two things. So let's say you're trying to work with people about making healthy lifestyle changes, like the walking backwards for 2 minutes a day. I mean, come on, you don't have 2 minutes. And people have the excuses. So here's the thing. You have one or two things. You can change the way you think about something, which can be a distortion, which makes you feel less anxious. And then, yeah, you're not going to have no change in behavior. Or you can maintain the truth, a rational way of thinking about something, and don't change it. Keep it the truth, because that's going to cause you to continue to feel anxious about a situation. And that's good, because not all anxiety is bad. Anxiety is there to motivate us. So I would rather stay anxious about something that's not good, because guess what? My only option will be to change my behavior now.
Right.
That's right.
I like that. That framing.
Yeah. Yes,
Your anxiety, just like pain, your anxiety is a signal that things aren't the way you want it to be or where they want to be. So don't medicate it. Try address it. And what do you do to get through it. That's
Yes.
good. I like that frame.
Yes, ma'am. And there's anxiety based in reality type situations,
Sure.
like someone who smokes cigarettes. Intellectually, they know that cigarettes, which is the number one most modifiable risk factor that's responsible for a lot of disease and health, COPD, osteosclerosis, I mean, pick things, right, that cigarettes do. But people will say, well, this one person I knew smoked cigarettes and lived to be 85, right? So they'll find the exception somewhere. Or as a comedian said one time with cigarettes, it has a Surgeon General's warning. He says, smoking may be harmful to pregnant women. He's like, well, well, I'm not a woman. I'm not, so it doesn't apply to me, right? So he's like spinning and rationalizing. Just don't buy the ones that say cause cancer, right? So there you go. So this spinning that people do. So reality type situations, this type of anxiety is there to make us feel anxious about potential problems that can happen in the future. If I smoke cigarettes, I could get COPD. If I'm 300 pounds, my diabetes type 2 is going to cause me to go blind, diabetic retinopathy, renal failure, and so on. These things can happen in the future. So I'm anxious. Anxiety is compelling you to do something about that potential threat. So this is good anxiety. We don't want that to ever go away. We just need to understand it and manage it. Now, there's another type of anxiety. It's more neurotic, where people overthink things and they have a way of thinking about stuff that's not rational. So now they have emotions that don't even belong. And now they're just really spiraling and out of control emotionally and anxiety. That's a whole other situation. So I just want to say that real quick, just so people don't confuse that I'm just like putting all anxiety in one box. But the reality situations, no, that's anxiety is good for us. We need to confront it, fight it, right? Figuratively speaking, not avoid it and run away. So yeah, these are great questions. What do we do with people that trying to motivate them? Well, there's going to be different ways we can approach that. I call it, sometimes you got to sneak in through the back door of their house and then come up and, hey, here I am, right? Versus blatantly just kicking the front door down and saying, look, dummy, you need to stop smoking cigarettes. It's going to kill you, right? Yeah. There you go. So
that works for some.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So great question. And there's a lot more that can be said about that and these types of issues. Okay, let's look at the second question. So there can be said there are many things that make up a person's health and wellness depending on what approach you're coming from, right? So what is your opinion, or in your opinion, what are some of the most important variables that contribute to a person's overall health? And a quick example, when I work with people, I always ask them about how much do you sleep at night, right? Sleep is a huge variable. So for me, sleep is one of the things I throw out there. Other people might say, no, it's your relationships. How you need to have boundaries with people and your job and work. You get it. Or some people might, hey, your chi. It's all about your chi. Or other people might be chakra, right? So whatever you believe influences what you think is important. So you, with being an architect of movement, I would imagine that that's going to influence some of your beliefs, right? But this is flexible. So, and you don't only have to pick one. You can pick as many things you want, by the way. So what do you think are really, if you got to tell somebody to start with a few things, what are you going to try to encourage them to do, right?
My soapbox is that your nervous system has to be feeling safe. That's the foundation of everything I do. So when I have clients or kids come to my space to see me for therapy, their knowing is you can come to my space however you are, whatever state you're in. It's not going to affect that we're going to have a session together and it's going to look like we're going to meet you where you're at. And so, if your neurological state is not in the right condition, then you cannot sleep. Your body is not going to digest the food that no matter how good your diet is. So like every system is impacted. And then if you don't feel safe, parts of your brain shut down, like you get into you're not quite out of the woods. So you're vigilant.
Yes, ma'am. That fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system, just having negative thoughts, thoughts by themselves, your brain interprets it as a threat. And when that happens, sympathetic nervous system, all these things happen. It undermines your ability to think rationally when this happens, for sure. And it's very subjective. Real quick example is that, arachnophobia, fear of spiders, right? I actually know a guy who had this. and it can be for different reasons, but they see a spider, they're terrified of it. They interpret it as an immediate threat. Their heart is beating whatever the age predicted maximal heart rate is. Maybe it's 220. It goes 0 to 100 miles per hour, right? Boom, it's instant. That's why it's scary when it happens. Yeah. So I've seen somebody have a fight or flight panic attack because someone put a fake spider in their desk thinking it'd be funny. He flipped the desk over, ran out the room, and knocked 2 people over, right? It wasn't funny to him.
No joke.
Oh, yeah. But the point is, another person might see a tarantula and say, hey, that's pretty cool. And they pick it up and pet it. They want to take it home as a pet, right? So what's the point? What's the point? It's subjective. Fear is subjective. And the reason I want to bring that up real quick, like, is for people watching this video, this is why it's important to learn to practice mindfulness of what you're thinking, what's your mind saying, what are you feeling, what are you reacting to, and trying to hopefully have a rational interpretation that best fits situations, because a lot of times we overestimate the threat of things. And because of this subjective thing that happens,
or underestimate.
Yeah, or underestimate too. 100%. You're right.
Because one of the major things that I talk to teachers about is that we think that we have created a safe space in our classroom, that the space is friendly and that we're a friendly teacher and that the kids feel safe. Mm-hmm. And this is separate from all the tragedies that have happened. This is just like you go into school and you're meeting your first grade teacher and we think we're creating a safe space, but that child, for 100,000 different reasons, might not be interpreting their space as safe. And so their body is going to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And they may be completely disengaged. So they look physically present, but they're not engaged. They can't access learning. So their physical state, their body, is impacted by the environment that we think is safe. And they're not interpreting it as safe for whatever reason. And we miss that. Some kids just are, with the whole ADHD, mm-hmm. Some kids are overwhelmed by so many things on the wall. They can't process all of that stuff. And teachers will feel like, well, the alphabet's there and the letters and the numbers and the colors, but that space doesn't feel good to that student and they can't process anything. So it looks lovely, but and so, as you said, it's very subjective. Every child we need to acknowledge that if there's something going on with that child, then in that moment, we should at least acknowledge that there's a possibility that the environment doesn't feel the way we expect it to feel for them. Yeah. And that to me is like, so if I go in, when I worked in rehab, somebody would be having a hip surgery and I'm the first person that's getting them out of bed. That's scary. I can't just say, get out of bed. I have to, make sure that they feel safe with my engagement and me coming into their space. And some people are ready to go and they're ready to jump up and they want that, let's go, heave me out of bed. And some people need a lot more coddling. And it's so subjective, but we can't, just like you were talking in the last part of your conversation, is like, sometimes you have to come to the back door because that person you can see has fear of something that's not rational. Mm-hmm. But you've got to meet them there. And so for me, there's no point in weight training. There's no point in physical conditioning. Like if your body is off, we know heart rate variability is such a huge factor in everything. If we aren't addressing their physical state before we get them to exercise, that's not going to have the impact, and they're maybe not going to tolerate it. And so to me, that's like the most critical part. But as you said, everybody has their thing.
No,
where I focus.
Hey, there's a lot to be said about interpreting our environment on a lot of levels, right? And you mentioned earlier in the video about, you mentioned like trauma, right? Trauma can be very relative to individuals. It doesn't all fit in only one box. There's also types of trauma that can be either compounded over time because of a theme that happens in your home or with people, or it might be one specific thing. So if you grow up for a significant part of your life always in a fight or flight response to some level, over time, that's traumatic. And then you grow up as an adult, you always feel like you're on eggshells because of your body's become comfortable thinking that that's normal to always be fight or flight, right? So an uncomfortable environment, even though it's not intended to, in a roundabout way, maybe causing kids to feel like they're just on that uneasiness type feeling. And if they're having to be around that a lot, a big chunk of their day, 8 hours of school, right? Yeah, over time that can add up. I've worked at places where they actually tried to make efforts to modify environments based on student needs. And I get it. Practically speaking, it may not be that easy to do that when you got thousands of students in a public school system. They probably do the best they can, but definitely within the individual classroom, teachers, yeah, maybe they can be as creative as they can to try to be mindful of that, or find maybe the middle ground, the balance. I remember the alphabet people in kindergarten. They're on the wall. Yeah, and then we'd have like the letter of the week, and they'd show like the little video of the alphabet people. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
So yeah, I get it. Definitely. I'm 51, by the way, and I'm not. I mean, you never ask a lady her age, right? But you might have grown up in school in a different time than when I remember.
I'm in your category.
Yeah. Okay. So when I grew up in school, there's a joke. It's a joke, and it's not meant to be dismissive. But they would say we didn't have ADHD when we were kids growing up. We had DAD. Dad, he whipped your butt. No, but yeah. So it's a bit of a joke. But no, but
there's so much to that whole thing.
Well, yeah.
Don't have recess as much anymore. Kids aren't running around outside for 3 or 4 hours a day. All of that.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was just making a little joke there, but
I like it.
Yeah, no. Well, it's kind of a joke about discipline and accountability for behavior, and that's a whole other issue. But I temporarily taught high school for a little bit when I was in graduate school.
Okay.
And I would get kids that would say, Mr. Hunter, I didn't do my homework because I have ADHD. Or Mr. Hunter, I'm not going to sit in my seat because I have ADHD. Or basically, I don't have to follow the rules because I have this label, ADHD. It gives me permission. Right. It gives me permission to do all these things and get away with it. So that's called demand characteristics. Because of the label, it justifies my behavior. And rather than understanding a situation as a means to try to change it or improve it, it becomes a justification to continue that behavior. Now, I'm not saying this happens across the board. It doesn't. I was actually told by a doctor I had ADHD in my 40s, right? So the thing is that there's a lot of people who have ADHD that what's neurotypical for them is a bit different. They have a higher stimulation threshold as compared to an average person. So they typically are thought of as needing more stimulation to feel normal or calm, to focus, right? So yeah, that's a real thing. And it can be for a lot of different reasons how people arrive at that. And so I get it, right? I really do. I think there's a balance there in how you try to help people adapt to that, because really it's about adapting, because the truth is, I'm pretty sure that these neurological things were around long time ago before they had a name for it. The difference is that you just had to adapt to your situation. And it's about adaptive ability. In fact, when they look at, they used to use terms like mental retardation, but Rosa's law, I believe in 2010, they got rid of that label. Yeah. They felt it was disrespectful. So they use intellectual disability. Right. And then they used to be real big about IQ, that was the big, it's an IQ. So if your IQ is this and this, here's the thresholds, this tells you basically what you're capable of doing. So they got away from that too. And they look more at, instead of a full scale IQ or whatever the discrepancy is between the performance and verbal and all that stuff, they look more about what is the adaptive ability of a person? What can they adapt to? How they function? That's more meaningful than aptitude alone based on a score, right? So
I don't see that as much in Massachusetts. Yeah. We are still heavily locked into IQ.
Yeah.
I like that conversation, and honestly, a lot of the educators that I've connected with through LinkedIn are in Texas and speak the way you speak, and that's not happening.
Hey. Texas is a bit more progressive than people think we are, right? We get labeled a lot. Yeah, that's right.
You get labeled a lot.
Yeah. So check it out. So here's the thing about adaptability, because we're talking about things that are important, right? So that this can be a thing, and as part of this question, I think adaptability is huge. So when I was in graduate school, working on finishing that, so I could be what I do today, I was able to teach high school because I started subbing, and they had to fire a teacher because he could not manage the classroom. And the principal says, well, you already have a bachelor's degree. I'll make you an emergency teacher for until we fill that. So I started being a regular teacher.
Wow.
And I did that. So I would get students sometimes, and it was like a fourth period class, whatever, and they called it content mastery. It's interesting the
Yeah,
word they pick.
we've
Yeah,
got talks like
yeah.
that.
So guess what content mastery was? You come in the classroom and you can open the book to find all the answers. You basically don't have to remember nothing. It basically, here, open book test, finish the work whenever you finish it, no problem. And basically, yeah, you're passed and have a good day, right? So that was it. And hey, okay. But these kids had no problems with intelligence or aptitude. A lot of times it's just behavior stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, we call this content mastery, but how's this helping them with adaptability to a real world? Because when you graduate high school and go into the real world, your employer is going to expect you to have a reasonable amount of flexibility, adaptability to function in a society. And in the real world, this content mastery class is not representative of a real world. So
Right.
are we preparing children or teenagers to succeed or fail?
Yep, you got
That's
that
right.
right. The
That's
adaptability factor is huge.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think that's something I would throw in there. The temperament. I throw this in real quick. All right. So I have a good memory. All my things my professors said back in the day. So I had a professor. He was a child psychologist.
Yeah.
And it was an abnormal psychology class. And he said, and we're talking about IQ and what's predictive of how well you're going to do in life. And he said his children would ask him, Dad, what's our IQ? Because he tested his kids. He's like, oh yeah, I don't need to know what your IQ is. Just know it's good enough, right? He wouldn't tell them what their IQ was, right? He goes, if it's 100, which is the mean, the average, you're good, no problem. He goes, I don't care about if your IQ is 120 in the superior level. What I care about is your temperament. And what's temperament, right? So I say this example a lot in videos, is that temperament, essentially, if you think of a blacksmith, when they make swords and weapons and they work with steel, right? What do? They heat it. They heat it up.
Yeah.
And the more heat it's put under, the greater the temper of the blade. And what does that mean? You can bend it more before it snaps and breaks. It can take more, it takes more stress before it snaps and breaks. Temperament. So you hear this word used of people. Oh, that person has a strong temperament. It's a way of saying that they can handle a lot. They can tolerate a lot of stress. They don't snap or break easy. Temperament.
Right, and that's
temperament.
That's what's missing in the school system, because it's like there's no boundaries. There's no thing for them to push against.
How do you get strong without resistance?
Create that temperament.
Yes, ma'am. 100%.
Because my boys are 20 and 23, and temperament. I would say up until this year, for my 20-year-old, he was still, and probably still now, fine-tuning it. With coaches, he would have to fine-tune his temperament and that pushback from his coaches. And then when he got a job in the trades, he had to figure out temperament with his boss. And he finally had a light dawns. But that's, it's like, you can't expect kids in high school to have all of those tools in place. Like they don't have that. So they need people. I mean, that's why you probably were a great teacher, because it's, no offense, but it's not even about the content. It's not the content, because the kids can look everything up online. It's the adaptability, it's the temperament, those skills that you have to learn to interact. So you take them out to the real world, and that's gone from schools. That is completely gone.
Well, there needs to be opportunities for children and teenagers and young people to develop this experience, to get that skill and that strength, because it's normal to go through that process, but then you eventually get it. So you mentioned sports. I mean, I started playing sports when I was 12 years old, structured sports. So I played football all the way up to my senior year in high school, track and field. I did powerlifting. And then even as an adult, I've done sports, powerlifting, bodybuilding, stuff like that. But the thing is, sports, even if you're the best athlete, or maybe you're an average player, or like, well, my son doesn't even play that much. I'm like, so what? If he wants to be on the team, let him do it, because he's learning things that are much greater than that for the rest of his life. He's learning virtue. He's learning discipline, virtues. He's learning to believe in him or herself. And some of the greatest lessons I learned in my life, what has made me as strong as I am, is being pushed to my limit in sports where you think you're going to die and you say, no, I'm going to get back up and keep going and not quit.
Resilience.
That's right. Resilience. Yeah. And I would have never learned that if I didn't have an opportunity. And I get it. Not everybody can play football or track and field. That's fine. There's other ways people can.
So many ways.
Yeah. Ways to have some kind of a resistance with another person, which is appropriate, like pushback from a coach, for example, right? Somebody who's going to challenge you. Yeah. So I get it. There's appropriate ways to do things, but I think a lot of things are taken, repackaged, and served back to society to tell you what it means. So you hear the word safe space. I can appreciate appropriate ways for how things need to happen or how people need space. I respect it. I do. But sometimes I think this gets hijacked, it gets repackaged and served back. And what it really means is you can't ever call nobody out on inappropriate behaviors. You can't ever address nothing. So then kids are smart. Oh, I need my safe space anytime they're trying to held accountable, right?
Right.
So these things, kids are very intelligent and smart. They know what they're doing. They can take something like that and now they can use it to absolve themselves from any confrontation or this pushback that we need.
Tools that they need. And I resonate with a lot of that. I mean, I had a trauma history and I didn't realize it, but sports were what helped me survive. Like my survival method was to stay fit because I needed to be able to run to protect myself. So being fit was my most important survival strategy. And I didn't realize that for most of my life, but I had all of the sports that I played and all the structure that I had, and I needed that intensity. I needed my heart rate to go up. I needed to be physically challenged, and all of my muscles were engaged for years and years and years. So all of the athletics that I did had a positive outcome. Running track was, running hurdles over. It was important that my body had tension in it the whole time. And playing soccer, there was no negative effect to having continual tension. But then I picked up golf later in life and that no longer worked. So like having that tension in my body, I now had to change my physiological state to have an outcome. Different athletic experience, different, box to have it in, but couldn't rely on those things. Had to learn how to adapt and pay attention. But there was I'm getting to my point of it. It was like, there was the safe thing of my body. Now, if I had grown up now, I probably would be a hot mess because, people didn't let me, I had to, stand up for myself. I had to get strong. I had to be whatever. And now I've had to learn how to soften my body so I can have an outcome and learn how to do that. But nobody could teach me how to do that. I had to have a reason external to myself that drove me to now change what I was doing. So it's like, it's like if you give the language that you need a safe space. So, and you remove the child from what they think, they've removed themselves. Now you've not given them any tools to get themselves to the next state that they need.
Reasons to become strong. Reasons to become strong is what I'm hearing you talk about. 100%. And it's not that, and there's a context and sure, there's thresholds for different things. So so there's things that happen that you have to confront things. You become stronger. You learn how to have coping mechanisms. Like sports was a lot of for me, sports was a coping mechanism. It got me out of my house, right? Yeah. I had a house that was I can talk. I had a bit of an interesting home I grew up in. All just to say, right? Yeah. Trauma. So no, sports gets me the heck out of the house, and then it turns into a good thing too. It makes me strong. So this idea of where these thresholds, right? So you need a reasonable amount of resistance or friction. So if it's lifting weights, right? My muscles are not going to grow. You're not going to get the neuromuscular adaptations without some type of essential mechanical stress, like the NSCA says in their journals, right? Yeah. I'm like my friends in the gym. Look, you're getting older. You might want to, your joints are healthy. There's no reason why you can't use improper form of squats. Put enough weight on there to where it feels like something, because if you're using the Q-tip weight, I joke with them, that Q-tip weight's not putting enough stress on your on your hips, your femurs, your spine, all that system. You need to load their back area, right? If you want to stay dense and keep those adaptations. I see people just doing a shoulder press machine or single joint stuff. No, you need to get up and down. Like you talked about squat earlier. There's a meme that says, you don't stop squatting and deadlifting when you get old. It's the other way around. You get old when you stop squatting and deadlifting.
Yes.
I squat every week below parallel. In fact, below parallel has done wonders for me. My butt I drop it below parallel. Eccentrically, I'm recruiting all that muscle on the way down. I get that wonderful stretch, and then I'm stronger coming back up as a result because I recruited more muscle. So my lower back, I have no problems. Everything is fantastic, and that is medicine to me. I'm like, I'm never going to stop squatting. I'm going to keep doing that the rest of my life. And that's a bit of
I don't know why, but the knees over toes guy came into my head. But it's like, as a physical therapist, I was trained like, don't go beyond 90. Don't let your knees go past your toes. But it's like, don't put more weight than your body can handle. But if you don't stress your body when you're thinking about it, then when you go do functional things, which you're going to do, and your knees are going to go over your toes and your ankles are going to bend, you're going to get hurt. So like the whole concept that like it's changed a lot.
Being fit,
they're not teaching that anymore, but people believe that still.
Well,
I can't do X, Y, and Z. Well, you need to, because when you get up, you can't get off the floor.
I know.
That's not okay. Like,
no, it's not.
You be able to get off the floor.
I know. Being fit is a superpower. That's what I tell people. If you're fit, it's a superpower in this world. I have a video actually. I have a video on how to get up and down off the floor if you have bad knees.
You do?
Yeah, it's on my YouTube.
I'll check it out. I'll check it out.
If you have bad knees, it's how to transition to the floor up and down if you have bad knees. So I had a lady, she had bilateral hip replacement surgery. She came to me years ago. She had poor upper body strength. And I said, what's your goal? What motivates you? She goes, I want to have the strength to get up and down off the ground to play with my grandchildren. I want to be able to give my grandson a bath, right? Fine, no problem. Long story short, I got her to where she's doing dumbbell flies with 30-pound dumbbells. She's planking, and I got her to strengthen the lower back, worked her legs out. And even within the range of motion with those hip replacements, I was like, okay, what's your doctor, physical therapist say is appropriate? And she says, well, they didn't really give me any restrictions. They said I can do things. So she was able to squat, deadlift, all those things. And mind you, she's like close to 70. So this person became strong. She lived out in the country. She was able to, she said, the horses almost were about to escape. And I found myself running and closing the gate. And I was surprised I did that. I was like, oh my God, what'd I just do? Right. So she became strong essentially. It's never necessarily too late to use expression. So being able to get up and down off the freaking ground. What the heck's going on here? It's not funny. It's not funny, but people, they think that's normal, and it's not normal, right? So back to this idea of reasons to get strong, whether it's physical, essential, mechanical stress to get strong, or if it's figurative in your life, like you in sports and trauma, and then being able to this adaptability. This is very interesting with all of life from the dimensions of wellness, whether it's your physical health. If you don't have no resistance or reason to get strong, you're going to be weaker. Mental health. If you don't learn adaptability, coping skills, that's going to undermine your systemically. Your job, if you don't learn how to have healthy boundaries of job, your personal life, or to manage that situation, you can be undermined. A lot of people can't hold a job because they just can't deal with people, right? All right. Relationships. If you don't understand, if you never have challenges in relationships and you just run away and avoid everything and you hide in the safe space, you're never going to learn social skills. You're never going to learn how to deal with people, solve problems, conflict resolution, be an adult, right? Nope, that's going to undermine you. And then whatever you believe about this world, a healthy way of viewing it, they all come together to make the whole person holistic, right? So Gestalt, the whole is much greater than just these individual things that stand out alone by themselves.
Correct.
The whole is much greater than just the sum of the parts, right? So all this matters we're talking about. We're talking about physical stuff, other things, right? So great stuff. All right, next question. Okay.
Crushing it.
All right, here we go. Do you have any existential beliefs, a philosophy, if you will, of what you believe about this world? Like, what the heck's going on here, right? Kind of like George Carlin. He had a lot of beliefs, right? Okay. Sure. what's our reason for being here, and or spiritual beliefs about what's happening here in the world in regards to purpose and meaning. And lots of ways you can approach this. There's no wrong answer. It's whatever you believe, right? I was talking about George Carlin before this video started. So if anybody doesn't like him, you can blame that on me. All right. Okay. All right. There you go. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So yeah, you can go in so many directions with this, but for me, like, I've run the gamut from religion to all sorts of spiritual wackiness through my 45 years of life. So I have hit every place, and I love the opportunity. I sit in beliefs now, but I don't stay in them because I know how much I've evolved and changed and been influenced by my Catholic upbringing and being in a spiritual community and going to Sedona and finding vortexes. And, it's like now I really try to think about like being connected with myself, and I have a connection with God. Okay. But I've hit every part of the spectrum that I love having the opportunity to hear what other people have to think, and having this collaborative experience and seeing where the threads are and what helps people get to the next place, or what part of any of those beliefs keeps you stuck and becomes a crutch or an addiction, or, that kind of thing. But for me, like, being here in a human body is about connecting with other people. Right. I don't understand any other point. Like, you have a job, you connect with other people. Like, for me, just going to a job to say I'm making money, I wouldn't sustain myself. I had the benefit and the choice of having children, and my connection with my children is so enriching, and I learned and grew and grow from what they do. And as you mentioned, like relationships, I spent many years like, kind of wishy-washy. I was just saying this to another friend, like I would have a sexual relationship with somebody and I would think now we're going to be together forever. And I had like that misconception for so many years. And it's like, how did you allow that to happen in your life? And, realizing like connection, communication, transparency, trust, like all of those things, like being able to be in relationship with people where you can show up as who you are and say, I'm going to say something that I know might challenge our friendship, our relationship, but I'm going to say it. I'm saying it lovingly and I care about you, but I need to say it because otherwise I'm not showing up as me. And that's really hard. And that's been like a long journey for me, and I won't do it any other way. So it's messy, but it creates that, like you were saying, that resistance of, everybody I come across, I want you to feel like you can be you. So if I am not showing up as me, then I am not being real with you. And so this human connection of being on earth and having this human experience, I love to travel. And the reason I love to travel is not necessarily because of the destination, but it's like the opportunity to experience other people and how they interact with their world. It's like fascinating, how different cultures do different things and how their lifestyles are different and how they interact with food. We don't interact with food really well in America. But you can go to, Europe and people are in love with their food and the way they interact. And it's part of their human interaction. You make food and you enjoy the creation of your food to share with your family. And then
food is love. Food is love for a lot of cultures. Food is love. Food is family. And that's why for some people it's challenging to change their eating or dietary habits because of this emotional connection that food is love. So if I don't eat grandmother's enchiladas and what do you call them? Platos, whatever they're called, I forget the name. So anyways, if I don't eat those, then my grandma's going to think I don't appreciate her and love her. So I'm going to eat it. That's right. Because food is love. So we have to find ways to get through that as a side note. So yeah.
And I think like what you're saying, like thinking back, 100 years ago, when our grandparents, there were certain things like eat everything you put on your plate and this and, it's like there were a lot of beliefs. And like what I'm saying is that the idea of being your true self and showing up and not excuses, just in knowing that sometimes when your true self comes out, it's coming from not the best place. So if that person knows that every time you're making this effort to be real and to connect, and grandma, I'm not trying to be offensive, but like that, I can't eat that. I know that you made it for me and I love it. And but being able to bring that to the table allows us to challenge ourselves. And I know my grandmothers went to their graves not saying a majority of what they needed to say on this planet. And so I feel like that's really shifted.
Yeah. So being able to be politely assertive when we need to be, because it's okay to love people and have rules. This is known as boundaries. It's okay to have that. So what I'm hearing, Grandma, is you made this wonderful meal for us and you feel excited for us to eat it. And if that's how you feel, I can appreciate it. But to be honest with you, I'm trying to work on losing weight right now. My doctor says that if I don't lose weight, I'm at risk for having diabetes type 2. And because I know you care about me, I'm imagining you're going to understand that maybe I might want to have chicken soup or something instead tonight, if you don't mind. But I do appreciate you and thank you, right? Boom, there you go. You're able to balance that out. Nobody has to get hurt. So communication is huge. A lot of times with older people, the emotional component makes it difficult and hard for them to process, even though it's rational. What about somebody who has still some connection with the Great Depression, like really old people? So when I was a little kid, my grandmother would still preserve food, preservative. She'd jar a bunch of stuff and have it stored for later. And she would say, eat all your food off that plate or you're going to wither up and blow away.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah. And eat everything. Yeah. So I get it. I can appreciate what you're saying. So good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So let's kind of dip into maybe some, people might call them woo-woo questions, right? But I'm always curious about people's life, and I have my own experiences, and I enjoy talking about stuff like this. All right. Do you have any personal experiences with anything that might be considered out of the ordinary? Some people might say paranormal or metaphysical, but maybe an experience in your life that doesn't necessarily fit in a box for explanations, like empirically, right? And if so, when did this happen? And did it have a change on your life or how you believe and think about things? I've had a few things in my life, things with like either dream experiences, things that physically with physics made no sense as a kid, that I could tell stories about. And yeah, I've had some experiences that, wow, I know this for me were things that were pretty real, and other people might think, you're a weirdo for that. That didn't happen. They don't believe you. And I don't care if people believe me or not. Right. A lot of people sometimes can have experiences. They don't fit in the mold or the box, right? You can call it paranormal, what you want. Like I've seen several ghosts as a kid, in different houses I've lived at. Right. And that were consensus validation. Other people saw the same things and across a period of time. Right. Stuff like that, as a quick example. So anyways, I think this is a fun question sometimes to ask people, just to kind of go into an area just for the sake of being able to talk about some things like this, right? So have you ever had anything that in your life that you might fit in any of those categories loosely or specifically? Yeah.
My list is long. I mean, I'm a weird person. That I'll just put that out.
Weird is good. It's normal, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm definitely a different person, but I guess the two major things that come to my mind is probably about 8 or 9 years ago, my boys and I moved to an oceanfront rental property, and we lived on the ocean. And I was going through a lot of stuff. My kids were going through a lot of stuff. And when I was a little girl, I used to draw every single morning. I kind of laid any artistic drawing, painting. I laid all of that to rest for majority of my life. Well, I was like, I don't know. I think I'm going to paint. I went to the store. I bought oil paints and a canvas. I had no idea. And in 2 hours, I had painted this lion head. it came out of me. Like it wasn't mine. I didn't create it because I wasn't trained. I didn't know how to, and it just came out of me. And so it was a way that I processed my emotions. And so now it's something that I do. Never been trained. I don't have any skills. Sometimes I'm not even supposed to do it, but I use my fingers to move the oil paint. It's just, it flows out of me, and it's how, there's no rhyme or reason how long it takes me to paint something. It's literally how long it takes me to process my emotions. So that is like something that like I can't, people are like, oh, well, you should paint this. And like, I can't just paint anything. It's the image comes to me. Either somebody says, this made me think of you, and then it connects with me. And then I have this whole emotional release, and then I paint it. And
it's almost like letting go, if you will. And then it just kind of flows. Yeah.
And then the painting stays in my house. It moves around different places. And then it seems like when it's ready to release, somebody buys it. Not for a lot. It's because I'm not trained. Okay. But in generally, and then the person that usually buys it connects with that emotion, and it's like the coolest thing ever happened. So to me, that's like an energetic, a way you connect with something that you just can't really explain.
Yeah, I've heard people talk in various documentaries or programs about psychic energy and emotions being imprinted or imbued into objects, paintings. So there's something to be said about that. Or what about just intuition when you get like this feeling of something like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. Yeah. So I can appreciate that. So
I'm pretty connected with that. Like I don't always honor it. I do now, but for many years I would have a sense and I wouldn't honor it. And then that, things would come about and I was like, oh, you knew that. And so I do a better job of honoring at least what I'm sensing, what I'm feeling, and, try not to run away, but like acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other big thing was when I suffered my trauma, and mine was not a one-time deal, and I didn't remember this for many years, but later in my life, I was like seeking this experience that I had, and this recall of literally being protected by the brightest, whitest light. Like when people describe when, if they were on the verge of dying or they're on the operating table and they die and they see this white light and
like an NDE, near-death experience. Yeah.
I would describe it the same way that people describe it, in that I felt like I was in this bubble of light, completely protected, despite the fact that was what was going on. And because I hadn't recalled it later in life, I was like, there were times in my life where I was seeking having that same thing. And it was at some point I attributed it to like this white bubble was like a connection with God. Like God was like literally covering me with this white protective energy over me. And I have had experiences where that happened again. And that kind of stuff to me is like where all of the other things that happen, I'm like, I can't deny that there's something outside of myself, and that, these energetic things that happen, and that we're so small compared to the universal, what's going on. And I still haven't figured out how to capture this, but literally that you can change your circumstance like in a second. And I've only experienced it from changing my physiology, from being like completely, in one state to, okay. So as a physical therapist, we teach people how to stretch their muscles. And we know that that's not like static stretching is, at this point, my belief is it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
In that you can change the state of that muscle in the blink of an eye, because you can literally change if your body goes to sleep, the muscle goes limp, so we know instantaneously we can change the state. And so my belief is that we can also do that with like every other circumstance in our life, that like in a blink of an eye, you can change this, like what is going on.
Mhm.
And those are all my crazy thoughts.
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
those are awesome thoughts. And no, I agree. You can change things in a lot of contexts, changing how you want to think about a situation. Like, for instance, people who have childhood trauma, they store the memory at an early age when their brain and mind's not fully developed yet. So the intensities stays there throughout their life. And then later, some who go to therapy will unpack that stuff. And the difference is now that they unpack it with their fully developed mind, they can reframe it with a more rational interpretation of what happened,
Right.
to have other feelings about it that are more plausible ones to be able to cope with. And that intensity can change. So you can change it. We can change a lot of things just with our thinking and how we reframe.
Yeah.
Some people use the term radical acceptance sometimes. Doesn't mean you agree with things, but you accept things you can't change.
Right.
You focus on what you can change, being in the
Yeah.
present. So there's that. And then the physical body, right? So I'm a big believer in dynamic stretching. I remember back in the old days, it's crazy. I would see guys doing this crazy static hold stretching. They'd even do passive stretching and be on the ground, so maybe pushing their leg, roll back.
Yes.
Before they did sprint relay, before they were gonna sprint. And I'm like, and of course the research shows now that actually weakens the muscle.
Yeah.
You're not going to be as
Right.
explosive.
You don't
Yeah, it's
have
like
the
a rubber
power.
band. What happens if you get a rubber band and pull it, it loses its elastic energy, right?
Yeah.
So the powerlifters used to do this, stretch before lifting weights. So of course we know now you don't want a static stretch before lifting weights or sprinting.
Yeah.
You dynamically warm up.
Yeah.
And then after you're done with all that, if you want to do static stretch, and do it afterwards at the end, right? I rarely do static stretch, and I do more dynamic movements. I prepare the body exactly for what I'm about to do. I do the pattern until I get warm, and then I'll increasingly add to it. And so, 100% what you said about the static stretch. And, you mentioned something about the pain, and that kind of made me think of Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote those books, Conversations of God.
Oh yeah.
It was basically like automatic writing. He just like, I give up. I need some answers. And so he just started writing. He just let go and started writing, and all this stuff flowed out of him. So a lot of times with artwork, it can be like that. You let it flow, you just, and it energetically comes through you, and you produce something, whether it's art or a book or something. I'm a big believer in that too. So fantastic. I love that stuff, right? We could probably talk all day on things like this, but yeah, I know. Okay, so let's kind of, this is kind of like my wrap-up question would be based, and this is kind of can piggyback off of everything we've already talked about, but based on your beliefs of everything you've talked about, how do we use this to, and this is about what we were talking about, to bring understanding and increase our collective well-being as human beings, right? Because you have your beliefs, I have mine. A lot of people have ideas of what's going on. But at the end of the day, I always ask people like, well, this is what I think and what I believe. Like people who believe in Bigfoot, they get made fun of, by the way. I'm like, why do you want to make fun of people who believe in Bigfoot? They have the castings of the foot, whether it's made up or not. And what's the point of me making that? It's like a physical thing they can show. You have a lot of eyewitness testimony. But wait a minute, you're a Christian, you believe in Jesus. I grew up Christian, by the way. So wait a minute. So let me get this straight. You're comfortable, and I respect it, being comfortable with your faith, whatever you're taught, but you're comfortable believing Jesus walked on water. He turned water into wine. He fed thousands of people with a few loaves of bread and fish and multiplied it. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and he resurrected and went to heaven. He's at the right hand of God, right? And you believe that, and I respect that. But these are all supernatural things that Jesus did. In fact, they believed in reincarnation. Jesus' disciples were questioning him. Well, Master, isn't it said that if the Messiah comes back, that Elijah must return from the dead? And Jesus says, well, if you'll receive it, I tell you, John the Baptist was him, but they didn't know it. So Jesus says John the Baptist was Elisha, returned from the dead, reincarnated, right? Because that was one of the requirements for the Messiah to be back, right? So all these things are in the Bible. So I'm a Christian. I grew up and went to church, so I'm comfortable. If anybody asks me about Jesus, hey, I believe it 100%, and no problem, I get it. But in the same breath, you're going to laugh at somebody who believes in Bigfoot. Or you're going to laugh at somebody who believes in the lost city of Atlantis. You're going to laugh at anybody that believes in Buddha. You're going to say, oh, that's not true. So this is a double standard of logic, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I say this is not to be antagonistic for anyone's a Christian. Like I said, I grew up, got dunked in the water and everything, right? So here's the deal. I'm just saying this open-mindedness to not be so quick to judge other people simply because what they believe about this world and trying to make sense of how things work here. Don't be so quick to be critical and judge other people, because then that closes us off. The story of Babel, which is in the Bible, maybe it's Genesis, the book, but what happens in that story? They wanted to get close to God, so they're building the tower to get to heaven. And whether it's metaphor, figurative type story, a parable, however you want to say, it's not literal, but they're building this tower, and all man became united. All human beings were united. They were getting the job done. It was working. They're getting there. And then the heavenly entities, authorities, whatever you want to call them, angels, heavenly people, said, behold, humanity has become united. They are all one, and nothing is impossible to them now. And guess what? They didn't like that. That's right. They didn't like that. Well, it's a message. It's a huge message, but also what also kind of is a bit disturbing is that these people didn't like it. Let's go mess it up. Let's go down there and confound their language to undermine them, so it'll be difficult for them to work together and communicate. So divisiveness, right? Divisiveness.
Yes.
Yep. Divide and conquer. So people divided are not going to accomplish as much as they could, right? So I guess where I'm going with this is whatever you believe, okay, then what? What do we do with that? Whatever you believe in this world. So if you believe in a better way for us to be better humans, whether it's not, maybe it doesn't fit in the same box as somebody else's, but at the end of the day, it's about being able to work together, cooperate, right? To be better, healthier humans, well-being, right? So yeah, anyways, I guess that's what I try to wrap it up in this regard. So regardless of what we believe, it's that then what question, because people would sometimes we have a healthy, fun debate, and I always finish it up. Okay, we had this big debate, so now what? What does that mean? Right. So if you believe in Bigfoot, or you believe in ghosts, or you believe in there's these people here that are ascended masters, or there's everybody has guardian angels that are trying to help us, that's fine, okay. But how do we work from whatever model you have to improve your life, to do better? My professor in graduate school says, I don't care what your theory is that you work off of from, but have one, have a model to work off of from to help people. You need to have one.
The reality is that if you really tease out, everybody does have the same desired outcome. Like really all of the religions, all of the, if you believe in the ascended masters, or you believe in God, or you believe in universe, whatever, we all have this desired outcome to have a human experience and to have connection and love foundationally. And, it's like it simplifies it, but it really is. It's like there is that common thread, and beliefs are what, I know for me in 45 years, the changes I've had in my beliefs, because I've allowed respectful conversations, and for people who I didn't understand before I had a conversation with them, to influence, like, wow, I just didn't think of it that way. Like to be able to have respect for other people's, the way they come to, really, we're all coming to the same conclusion, is really, and like you said, many of these things are used as divisive tools to separate us.
That's
and
right.
We're not going to get anywhere in that regard.
Right. I get it. So interesting challenges we have as people, right? That we're still working on, obviously. And that's okay, I suppose, right? Maybe that's the part of that purpose and meaning. We're here.
I think so.
We're here to have friction and learn, right? So, all right. Well, is there any one piece of nugget or one last thing you want to say to whoever watches this video, a parting message? And if people wanted to like contact you, and if you're comfortable with that, about what you do, I can put a link to you below if you want me to.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay.
I thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. I think these conversations are so powerful. I think that in conversation, we understand each other better. We can learn from each other on how to get to the next place in our life. Like we all want forward movement, but things don't have to be so complicated, and connecting with other people is how we learn it. So, I think what you're doing is awesome. And thank you for letting me be on your platform.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. And maybe in the future, we can do another video just about supernatural stuff, but okay.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I love
All right.
that.
All right. Thank you. And bye-bye.